you very much, Sir George, and thank the Honourable Member for Neath for leading off in this debate. I just want to say very briefly to the Honourable Member for Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale, if horse racing was even partially responsible for fomenting an uprising against the UK government, I would be leading the charge. But it's not. It's a terrific sport which people gamble on and enjoy. And this petition is a tiny little bit about horse racing and a lot about the black market and affordability checks. But we spent nearly 2.5 hours more talking about the horse racing industry. And I'm delighted. I'm delighted, before you put me down, I'm delighted. It's great to see that so many MPs here today have recognised the fact that online gambling is a dangerous thing, and online casinos are a dangerous thing, and we have to be on top of that to help people away from the course of addiction. Because I haven't seen many of those members sit in front of grieving parents when their child has been driven to complete suicide. I have seen them in the racecourses, and I have seen them back up their racecourse, which is understandable. If I had a racecourse in my constituency, I would say it's a hugely important part of my constituency, and it generates money, and the supply chain around it is very important. Not right now. It's hugely important. And we look at the sort of money the gambling industry feeds into the industry.
Asserted that members who spoke in favour of racing or who have racecourses in their constituencies have never sat in front of grieving parents and don't know anything about addiction and have never comforted those affected by addiction. The honourable gentleman knows nothing about me, and he knows nothing about many other colleagues who spoke. And I'd ask him to be very careful about how he approaches what he says, and that he has sensitivity before making assertions about any member here, or their motivations, or their families, or their experience of addiction.
Not a point of order, but the honourable gentleman managed to get that off his chest.
No, I absolutely take on board what you said, and I apologise if I've worded that wrongly. I was talking about the sessions we'd had, the APPG for gambling department. I appreciate, as was pointed out earlier on, that many people have been touched by the curse of gambling addiction. I apologise if I got that overhanded. Yeah. The point here is this: I think it's understandable that so many people have raced to sign this petition. They've been motivated to sign this petition, 649894, which calls on the UK government to not implement proposed financial risk checks for online gambling. The gambling industry led and paid for this lobby have been hell-bent on spreading disinformation, which is designed to create uncertainty and raise concerns amongst people that enjoy the occasional gamble. I understand the punters' point of view when they feel the fear behind this, because that's the message they've been fed. The truth about affordability checks is, however, more complicated. I am not a prohibitionist. How many times have I had to say that? I am not trying to ban gambling. I do want to create a safe environment for gambling. It may come as a surprise that affordability checks were not the invention of the APPG on gambling-related harm. This is not some mendicious ploy that the group is using. It's an idea that was mooted in 2019 by Tom Watson, when I believe he was still the MP for West Bromwich East, and industry leader Richard Flint, when he was at Sky Bet, supported Mr Watson by saying there are too many people losing money that they can't afford online. We need to work together as an industry and with the government to limit that. I think that limits on spend rather than stakes is the right way to go, and those limits should be based on affordability. He also acknowledged that these limits could lead to a drop in operator revenue, and clarified that by adding there will be some online firms in the short term that would make less money as a consequence, and added, and getting straight to the point, but then that spend shouldn't happen anyway. A point that maybe the Jockey Club should consider as our CEO launched this petition, citing a potential loss in the horse racing betting levy, which, according to their own board's annual report, was worth £100 million or £5 million lost. But what price? What price in a life? What price in the number of people who have been driven to complete suicide? Turning back to the need for affordability checks. A year later, at the 2020 Lords Committee, The UK's biggest operator, the CEOs of the Big Five, spoke enthusiastically about the need for affordability checks as a key mechanism to reduce harm. Industry CEOs saying that the way to go is affordability, and to ensure that when people come to our sites, they can only afford to lose or bet an amount that, quite frankly, they can afford and are comfortable with. So what's new? What's new is that since the White Paper, the Government and the Gambling Commission have proposed actual threshold figures for these checks. Affordability is no longer an abstract concept. It is tied to precise thresholds. The industry don't like the fact that the White Paper has called their bluff, and so they're kicking up a storm. It's clear that to create a safe environment, those that may be categorised as the pro-gambling lobby and those such as myself that could be called a safer gambling lobby agree that affordability is an area that needs tightening up. I wonder if that was explained to everyone that signed the petition. And when the petition says the proposed checks could see bettors having to prove that they can afford their hobby if they sustain losses as low as £1.37 per day, and that figure has been scoffed at a few times in this debate, £500 a year, nothing to us. Nothing to us as MPs on 86 grand a year, but £500 a year can be the difference between some people putting money in the meter or putting food on the table. And what we're trying to do is stop them getting to the point where they lose that money in the first place. So please, don't belittle that. If the checks say they can afford it, then they can afford it. We're trying to help those at risk. Surely even all gamblers can see that because they understand risk. The UK Government has already said the proposed checks are only on the very highest spending online customers. The Gambling Commission estimates that approximately 20% of customers' accounts would meet the threshold for financial vulnerability check. The second line of this petition is about the black market. The Gambling Commission has already reported to us that the size of the online black market has been overstated by the industry and must be kept in proportion. The argument follows that if we want to prevent growth of the black market, regulation to prevent incidences of harm that lead to addiction is the solution to eliminating demand for a black market and not its cause. Harm prevention will mean fewer addicts, fewer self-exclusions and fewer attempts to circumvent the regulated market in the first place. And the next line, to me, is the key to this. We are concerned there will also be a negative impact on British horse racing finances due to a reduction in better turnover and resulting fall in levy yield. A Trojan horse, if ever I've seen one. And the point behind this... Sure.
I've been listening with increased disappointment to the tone which the member's taken, and given the importance of tackling problem gambling, doesn't he also recognise, like the 7,000 people who live in my constituency, the importance of horse racing? And does he recognise that horse racing betting has equally low problem gambling associated with it as betting on the National Lottery? And the National Lottery is carved out of this, and therefore shouldn't horse racing betting be carved out of it, and then we can all concentrate on tackling gambling harms exactly as he would like to?
Well, I'll bring your attention to the message that's been given out clearly by the UK Government. The Government are keen to ensure that measures such as these checks do not adversely affect racing or interrupt the customer journey. They also cannot push away high-net-worth individuals, such as owners and trainers who invest in the sport. So I would suggest, it's not for me to say, the Government's all over this. The Government understands the difference between online gambling, casino gambling and horse racing. So the key to this, from my point of view, is that people are spending more than they can afford, and as a result, some are dying. That's a human cost, and that cost is completely unacceptable.